Articles 7.1a and 25.3f, and Count 5, attempted murder as a war crime, punishable under Articles 8.2ci and 25.3f, insofar as the RIA targeted for killing at least 194 civilians at 6 of the IDP camps, namely Abia, Balonyo, Odek, Pagak, Lukodi, and Abok, who did not die due to independent circumstances and who were taking no active part in the hostilities. Count 6, torture as crimes against humanity, punishable under Article 7.1f, insofar as the RA inflicted severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon at least several hundred civilians abducted during and in the aftermath of the attacks on the Lwala Girls' School on 6 of the IDP camps, namely Pajule, Abia, Odek, Pagak, Lukodi, and Abok. Count 7, in the alternative to torture, other inhuman acts, severe abuse, and mistreatment as a crimes against humanity punishable under Article 7.1k, insofar as the RA inflicted great suffering and serious injury to body and to mental and physical health of at least several hundred civilians, as described under Count 6. Count 8, torture as a war crime punishable under Article 8.2ci, insofar as the RA inflicted severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon at least several hundred civilians, as described under Count 6, who were taking no active part in the hostilities and for the purposes of intimidation, coercion, and discrimination. Count 9, in the alternative to torture, cruel treatment as a war crime, punishable under Article 8.2ci, insofar as the RA inflicted severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon at least several hundred civilians who were taking no active part in the hostilities as described under Count 6. Count 10, enslavement as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7.1c, insofar as the RA exercised powers attaching to the right of ownership over at least 100 of civilians abducted during and in the aftermath of the attacks on the Lwala Girls' School and 6 of the IDP camps, namely Pajule, Abia, Odek, Pagak, Lukodi, and Abok. Count 11, pillaging as a war crime, punishable under Article 8.2e5, insofar as the RRA fighters intentionally deprived and appropriated for private or personal use food supplies, livestock, and other property from the homes, shop, and other facilities of civilians living at the Lwala Girls' School and the 7 IDP camps without the consent of the owners. Count 12, destroying the enemy's property as a war crime, punishable under Article 8.2.12, insofar as the RRA destroyed homes, shops, and other facilities used by and belonging to civilians living at 5 of the IDP camps, namely Abia, Balonyo, Pagak, Lukodi, and Abok, which was not required by military necessity. Count 13, persecution as a crime against humanity punishable under Article 7.1h on political grounds of civilians of the 7 IDP camps perceived by the RRA as being affiliated with or supporting the Ugandan government based on the facts underlying Count 1 to 12. Count 14, persecution as a crime against humanity punishable under Article 7.1h on age and gender grounds of at least 70 schoolgirls from Lwala Girls' School based on the fact underlying Counts 1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. The crimes committed against women and children in northern Uganda throughout the charged period are the following. Count 15. Enslavement as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(c), insofar as the ORA exercised powers attaching to the right of ownership over at least thousands of children and women in the ORA. Count 16. Forced marriage as an inhuman act as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(k), insofar as the ORA inflicted great suffering and serious injury to body and mental and physical health by imposing a forced conjugal union on at least hundreds of girls and women in the ORA. Count 17. Rape as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(g), and Count 18. Rape as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(6), insofar as the ORA raped at least hundreds of girls and women in the ORA. Count 19. Torture as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(f), insofar as the ORA inflicted severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon at least thousands of children and women in the ORA. Count 20. In the alternative to torture, other inhuman acts, severe abuse, and mistreatment as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(k), insofar as the ORA inflicted great suffering and serious injury to body and to mental and physical health of at least thousands of children and women in the ORA. Count 21. Torture as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(ci), insofar as the ORA inflicted severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon at least thousands of children and women in the ORA who were taking no active part in the hostilities and for the purposes of intimidation, coercion, and discrimination. Count 22. In the alternative to torture, cruel treatment as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(ci), insofar as the ORA inflicted severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon at least thousands of children and women in the ORA who were taking no active part in the hostilities. Count 23. Persecution as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(h), on the grounds of gender and age, based on the facts underlying counts 15 to 22, 25 to 29, of at least thousands of children in the LRA. Count 24. Persecution as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(h), on the grounds of gender, based on the facts underlying counts 15 to 22, 27 to 29, of at least thousands of women in the ORA. Count 25. Conscripting children as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(7), insofar as the ORA conscripted at least thousands of children under the age of 15. Count 26. Using children to participate actively in the hostilities as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(7), insofar as the ORA used at least thousands of children under the age of 15 to participate actively in hostilities. Count 27. Sexual slavery as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(6), insofar as the ORA exercised powers attaching to the right of ownership over at least thousands of girls and women in the ORA, and causing them to engage in one or more acts of a sexual nature. Count 28. Forced pregnancy as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7.1g, and Count 29, forced pregnancy as a war crime, punishable under Article 8.2e6, insofar as the OLRA perpetrators confined and made forcibly pregnant at least hundreds of girls and women. Mr. Kony is criminally responsible for the charged crimes contained in Count 1 to 29 by committing such crimes jointly with his co-perpetrators and through the OLRA fighters pursuant to Article 25(3)(a). At least between 1st of July 2002 and 31st of December 2005, Kony shared a common plan or agreement pursuant to Article 25(3)(a) with Vincent Oti, members of Control Altar, and the LRA Brigade commanders to attack civilians in northern Uganda whom the OLRA perceived to be supporting the Ugandan government, and to sustain the LRA by committing the charged crimes, including systemic crimes against children and women abducted and integrated into the LRA. Mr. Kony and his co-perpetrators implemented this common plan through the hierarchically organized structure of the OLRA. Kony made the following essential contributions to the charged crimes. 1. Regularly ordering LRA units to attack, kill, and mistreat civilians perceived to be supporting the Ugandan government and to destroy or steal civilian property. 2. Making strategic decisions regarding the manner, intensity, and focus of attacks against civilians in northern Uganda. Maintaining the system of abductions during the charged period and issuing orders to all OLRA to abduct civilians. 4. Devising and enforcing the OLRA rules for the mistreatment of women and girls. 5. Personally using children as escorts and abducted women and girls to act as domestic servants and as forced conjugal partners. 6. Devising and maintaining the OLRA disciplinary system as such and motivating OLRA commanders through rewards and threats to conduct OLRA operations. 7. Deciding the command structure and promotions, demotions of OLRA commanders and the transfer of fighters between units. And 8. Deciding on the allocation of supplies, including weapons and ammunition within the LRA. At the time of his contributions, Mr. Kony meant to engage in the charged conduct and intended, or was aware, that the charged crimes would occur in the ordinary course of events. Kony was aware of the criminality of the common plan and that the crimes would be committed in the ordinary course of events as a result of its implementation. Kony was also aware of the features of the LRA, including its organized and hierarchical structure that allowed him and the other co-perpetrators to have joint control over the crimes. In the alternative, Mr. Kony is criminally responsible for ordering and inducing the commission of such crimes by the OLRA perpetrators pursuant to Article 25(3)(b). Kony meant to engage in this conduct and was aware of his position of authority and influence over the physical perpetrators of the crimes. He intended the crimes or was aware that the crimes would be committed in the ordinary course of events as a result of the implementation of the orders or as a result of his acts or omissions. At all material times, Mr. Kony and the OLRA perpetrators carried out all physical elements of the specific crimes charged and possessed all attendant mental elements. Mr. Kony is further criminally responsible for the charged crimes contained in counts 30 to 39 by individually committing the following crimes against 2 females pursuant to Article 25(3)(a) during the charge period. Count 30. Enslavement as a crime against humanity punishable under Article 7(1)(c), insofar as Mr. Kony exercised powers attaching to the right of ownership over victim 1 and 2. Count 31. Forced marriage, an inhuman act as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(k), insofar as Mr. Kony inflicted great suffering and serious injury to body and mental and physical health by imposing a forced conjugal union on victim 1 and 2. Count 32. Rape as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(g). And count 33. Rape as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(6), insofar as Mr. Kony raped victims 1 and 2. Count 34. Torture as crimes against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(f), and count 35. Torture as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(ci), insofar as Mr. Kony inflicted severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon victims 1 and 2, who were taking no active part in the hostilities for the purposes of intimidation, coercion, and discrimination. Count 36. Sexual slavery as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(6), insofar as Mr. Kony exercised powers attaching to the right of ownership over victims 1 and 2, causing them to engage in acts of sexual nature. Count 37. Forced pregnancy as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(g), and count 38. Forced pregnancy as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(6), insofar as Mr. Kony confined and made forcibly pregnant victim 1. Count 39. Persecution as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)(h) on age and gender grounds, based on the facts underlying counts 30 to 38 of victims 1 and 2. Kony committed these crimes with the requisite intent and knowledge. At all material times, Mr. Kony carried out all physical elements of the specific crimes charged and possessed all attendant mental elements.
Thank you very much, Court Officer. All right. I turn now to the parties on the issue of Rule 122(3). The prosecution and defense both had the opportunity to submit written observations pursuant to this rule on matters that could not have been brought to the attention of the Chamber at an earlier stage of the proceedings. The Chamber gave a date for the receipt of such observations, and it was the 22nd of August, 2025. The prosecution and the defense did not provide any such observations, which of course was their right. Can the parties confirm that they do not wish to bring any such matters and that we can proceed with the opening statements? Defense?
Your Honour, we can so confirm.
Very well, thank you. Prosecution? The microphone was not on.
Aucune observation du côté du procureur.
We have no observation to make from the side of the prosecution.
Thank you. In that case, then, we proceed to the prosecution's opening statement. Prosecution, keep in mind, you have 30 minutes.
Mesdames,
Your Honours, you have agreed to hold this confirmation of charges hearing against Joseph Kony. The dock is empty of any potential accused. Joseph Kony is not present here today. 20 years ago, other judges of this court issued a warrant of arrest against him. He has been at large for the last 20 years. And for the last 20 years, he has managed to evade justice. This international justice that the government of Uganda and the many victims, particularly in northern Uganda, have sought, as they were unable to render justice in their own country. We have done everything we can. We have done everything we can to live up to the important responsibility that, on the one hand, the founding members of the Rome Statute, and on the other, the beneficiaries of the justice that this statute postulates, have placed in us. Unfortunately, the tentacles of international criminal justice, even though lengthy, with the cooperation of states, whether they be signatory to the Rome Statute or not, have not been sufficient to ensure the swift arrest of fugitives. Many victims who had the strength to survive the horrors of a devastating civil war have unfortunately not survived this lengthy wait. Others have lost patience. But there are still those who, against all odds, have waited for this very moment. And it is for all these victims that it is important for this hearing to be held today, tomorrow, and the day after that. This hearing, Madam President, as you reminded us at an earlier stage, is not a trial in absentia. The right of a person to be present at their trial and to challenge the charges against them is a sacred right, as we know. However, without in any way altering this right, our statute, as you also reminded us, in certain circumstances, allows that the suspect does not frustrate, by their own will, the confirmation of charges against them, in particular, by choosing not to respond to the summons of the court. So, it is by virtue of this mechanism, Article 61, paragraph 2, which, as you reminded us, has never been used before. You will be using this, ladies and gentlemen of the bench, to examine the 39 charges brought against the ICC's longest-standing fugitive. These charges that you have just heard read out before the court. These crimes whose victims include men, women, children, and young girls, will forever remain part of the dark pages of Uganda's history. These crimes include murder, different forms of slavery, rape, inhuman and degrading treatment, and many other acts that the prosecution intends to present at this hearing on the merits. The crimes were committed by an armed group, the Lord's Resistance Army, to which I shall refer to using its initials, the LRA. And in English, it is known as the Lord's Resistance Army. So these crimes were committed by the LRA under the orders of Joseph Kony. Your Honours, Joseph Kony, whom we see here in this photograph, has always been the leader of the LRA, upon which he imposed his cruel vision. He also moulded the group to his own image. It was a true army, a new society that he set up to exploit the young men and women from northern Uganda, young people who were brutally abducted in order to swell its ranks. Girls and young women have been enslaved and subjected to forced pregnancies, whilst the boys were forcibly recruited to fight the Ugandan army. The vicious circle of this criminality meant that the victim became the executioner or the perpetrator, as this court has witnessed in a previous such case. Joseph Kony never wavered in his role. He remained the main perpetrator until the very end, a role that he assumed and exercised with full knowledge of the fact. He is over 60 years of age today, but still on the run, despite all efforts to bring him to justice. And it is in this particular context that the prosecution considered that a confirmation hearing in his absence was justified. This hearing, in our opinion, will advance the proceedings in a tangible way. And this hearing, if, Your Honours, the charges are confirmed, it will allow the proceedings to move rapidly to the next stage as soon as Joseph Kony is arrested and surrendered to the court. And we are not despairing. Your Honours, the events that led to this hearing are unprecedented. The charges against Joseph Kony relate to serious events that took place in northern Uganda between the 1st of July 2002 and the 31st of December 2005. The LRA has been carrying out its criminal activities in this part of the country since the 1980s. This armed group was first known under the name of the Holy Spirit Movement before being renamed as the LRA. And it was within this movement that Joseph Kony effectively rose to power. From 1988, he organized and led this armed group. Kony's forces then waged a guerrilla-type insurgency against the government in power. The armed conflict lasted throughout the 1990s, despite a number of peace initiatives. An extract from the testimony of P0422 has been provided to the Chamber, and this excerpt gives a detailed account of the historical context and background of the LRA. And may I refer you to ERN UGA-OTP-00000966 and 967. I will now review some of the elements of the chronology of this case. The UPDF, that is to say the Ugandan government army, retaliated against the LRA by setting up the Iron Fist operation, Operation Iron Fist, which started officially in the year 2002. The LRA bases in Sudan were then destroyed, and hundreds of individuals were killed. Joseph Kony escaped capture. After this operation, most of the LRA units and their elements returned to Uganda. And it was in this context that on the 14th of June 2002, Uganda ratified the Rome Statute. In January 2004, Uganda, that is to say, a member of the ICC at this point, referred the situation to the ICC. When the investigation began in July 2004, the war and the crimes attributed to the LRA were ongoing, and the office was operating in difficult terrain. At the time, many sites were inaccessible. But despite all these challenges, the office was able to gather enough evidence to request the issuance of an arrest warrant, which was initially under seal, against Joseph Kony, issued on the 8th of July 2005. Arrest warrants were issued against other senior LRA leaders, such as Vincent Oti, who died in 2007. There is also Raska Lwala, who died in 2006, as well as Okot Odhiambo, who died in October 2013, and Dominic Ongwen, who was tried by this court. These are the first arrest warrants to be issued by the ICC that were subsequently made public on the 13th of October 2005. Kony is charged with 33 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Your Honours, The tireless efforts of the office, in conjunction with the registry and its partners, to secure the arrest and surrender of the fugitive, have to date proven unsuccessful. From the 1st of June 2006, an Interpol Red Notice was issued, and it remains active today. Other initiatives have followed many other initiatives. Requests for the arrest of Joseph Kony were sent to several states. In October 2008, the European Parliament requested for a plan to be put in place for the arrest of Joseph Kony. In 2012, African Union troops were tasked with searching for Joseph Kony. It was Europe and it was also Africa. And even American troops joined the search. For years, the Ugandan government army made concerted efforts to apprehend Joseph Kony. Civil society organizations launched public campaigns to facilitate his arrest. These same efforts are ongoing today and are not expected to cease until Joseph Kony has been arrested. I will now review some important elements of the proceedings in this case. In January 2015, Dominic Ongwen, commander of the Sinya Brigade, surrendered.
The judges separated his case from that of Joseph Kony, and his trial was held between 2016 and 2019. Dominic Ongwen was found guilty on the 4th of February 2021, and he was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment on the 6th of May 2021. His sentence was upheld on appeal on the 15th of December 2022. After 20 years of searching in vain, we now ask you, Your Honours, to confirm the charges in the absence of the suspect. Through the 39 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes brought against Joseph Kony, we have sought to cover the systemic criminal activity of the LRA during the reference period. But that doesn't mean that we have been able to exhaustively list all of the crimes. That just isn't possible, but at least those that were the most emblematic, those are the ones that we have submitted. Now, Your Honours, the case against Joseph Kony concerns systemic violence inflicted on Ugandan citizens in northern Uganda. This violence was perpetrated by the LRA under the command of Joseph Kony. The citizens of northern Uganda had no choice but to abandon their homes and possessions. They lived in constant fear of attacks and abductions. The impact of LRA attacks on children in northern Uganda has been particularly severe. Fearing attacks and abductions, thousands of children every night had to flee their villages to seek refuge in towns such as Gulu. They travelled at night without their parents just to stay safe. The video appearing on your screens is an excerpt from a documentary released in July 2006 by Journeyman Pictures. This excerpt illustrates the LRA's violent campaign against children, and it is recorded under ERN UGA OTP 00001369 1132 to 1208. The faces of the children you see on screen have been blurred.
The next morning, the kids, cold and tired, began to return to their villages. Children who spend their lives in fear.
The repercussions of this unprecedented violence continue to be felt today. Scarred in their body and spirit, survivors still struggle to recover from the ordeal they endured. The social and cultural fabric of northern Uganda has been torn apart, and it is still struggling to rebuild itself. In addition to the abduction of children, there have been attacks on civilians in camps for displaced persons. Civilians were effectively placed in camps for displaced persons within the framework of the counter-insurgency strategies adopted by the Ugandan government, which consisted of removing civilians from rural areas and resettling them in towns and later in camps for displaced persons. At the height of the crisis in 2004, almost the entire population of northern Uganda, or 1.5 million inhabitants, were living in camps for displaced persons, as is attested to in the report at ERN UGA OTP 0044 0044 and page 51 thereof. In the meantime, the LRA grew into an army of several thousand fighters receiving significant support of Sudan. It has established base camps in southern Sudan and receives weapons and military training from the Khartoum government. And here I refer you to ERN UGA OTP 00000966 at page 52 thereof. Even after Operation Iron Fist in 2003 and 2004, LRA violence continued to focus on refugees in camps for displaced persons in northern Uganda. Now, my colleague Melissa Timms will tell you later about the LRA's attacks on several camps for displaced persons. She'll tell you about the pillaging, murder, torture, serious exactions, abuses and abduction of civilians by this armed group. More than 600 civilians were killed in the attacks, purely covered by the charges alone. But the number of unidentified victims is much higher. The Ugandan authorities recorded the moments following one of these attacks. This is an excerpt from the Barlogno attack, which we will hear an excerpt from. You will see Ugandan police officers conducting forensic examination. We have chosen an excerpt that does not allow for the identification of the people filmed. It is at UGA OTP 0021 0012 and in particular minutes 4:03:23 to 04:36:18.
vous verrez que des représentations graphiques de restes.
You will see graphic depictions of human remains in this excerpt. Our office's Scientific and Technical Analysis Unit analysed these recordings along with other evidence in order to identify the victims. The results of the analysis are set out in the annex to our pre-confirmation brief. The prosecution contends that the LRA considered refugees in the displacement camps to be enemies. Joseph Kony accused them of supporting the government of President Museveni. His motto was clear: if you are not with us, you are against us. And my colleague, the team leader, Leonie van Braun, will explain to you in greater detail the key role that Joseph Kony played in the attacks on these camps. Your Honours, Joseph Kony established a system of abducting men, women and children in northern Uganda. The LRA forcibly abducted thousands of people and enslaved them during the period covered by the charges. The abducted women were subjected to multiple forms of enslavement. They were forbidden to leave the LRA. Partners were imposed on them. They were subjected to rape and other forms of sexual violence. They were subjected to reproductive control, including forced pregnancies, which forced them to give birth in the bush without prenatal or postnatal care. And they were subjected to exploitation aggravated by labour in conditions of domestic servitude. Within the LRA, these women were referred to as wives, a euphemism for forced conjugal partners and domestic slaves. Children were not spared either. Kony abused their innocence, as well as their inexperience, to swell the ranks of his army. He set up a veritable army of child soldiers, and perhaps I will show the last video. Boys and girls, sometimes under the age of 18, were abducted and enlisted into the LRA. Some were abducted on their way to school or from the fields. They were forced to become soldiers or reduced to being childminders or sex slaves. And this is the picture that I'm going to present to you. It presents a protected witness, and for that reason, this part cannot be shown to the public.
Donc, vous pouvez voir sur vos écrans une photo du témoin.
So you can see on your screens a photo of witness P0275, who was abducted at the age of 9 in 2004 during one of the attacks covered by the charges. And this witness, P275, stated, and here I quote, "During the period when I was held captive by the LRA, I saw children younger than me being trained to shoot with weapons. I knew they were so young because the muzzles of their AK-47 rifles dragged on the ground when they carried them on their shoulders." And here I refer you to ERN UGA OTP 0044 and page 3407 thereof. P0275 is just one example among thousands of children who suffered the same fate. The children suffered abuse, hunger, and thirst. Many of them died in captivity. In a radio interview in 2002 with the Ugandan radio station Mega FM, Joseph Kony and his deputy Vincent Otti admitted to implementing a policy of abducting civilians and young girls. And here is what Kony said: "As rebels, we do not kidnap children, but that is how we recruit. Otti followed the same line of reasoning. He said, I want to ensure you that the girls we take in and send to the bush are our mothers. We always take young girls who are not infected with HIV, so that those who are infected with HIV remain among you. And here I refer you to the last ERN, namely UGA OTP 0023011, and namely pages 3 and 10 thereof. And now I'm going to finish, Your Honours, by stating that children have been deprived of their fundamental rights, their right to health, education and freedom. Their childhood has been stolen from them. Joseph Kony remains untraceable within the meaning of the statute. Today's hearing is a very important step in the administration of justice. The prosecution has only been able to bring the case to this stage of the proceedings thanks to the courage of the victims and affected communities. It is also thanks to the excellent cooperation of the Ugandan authorities, traditional leaders, states, organizations, and all partners. Continued cooperation is crucial to bringing Joseph Kony's flight to an end for once and for all. Kony's arrest and surrender should allow the next phase of this case to begin, and if the charges are confirmed by the Chamber at the end of this hearing, as we request, Your Honours, I would like to thank you for your patience and for your attention.
Thank you very much. CLRV representatives, we have 10 minutes. Would you propose to start?
Thank you, Madam President. I think it is best to do the whole presentation at once, and I would suggest that we take the break and I start after the break.
We find that acceptable, so that we will take the break now. It's a bit early, so we compute 30 minutes from now, which would be 20 after 11, and we will return to hear the CLRV. All right then, shall we?
All right, we will away.
The evidence shows that he was the uncontested leader of the LRA. Witnesses with knowledge of the internal structure refer to him variously as the overall leader, chairman, president, chief commander. I refer your honors to the references cited at footnote 7 of our brief. For instance, UGA OTP 01500063 at paragraph 12. Further, Mr. Kony shared a common plan with his second-in-command, Vincent O.T., and other LRA commanders. And what is it these men wanted to achieve? As demonstrated by the sequence of events charged in this case, the LRA co-perpetrators wanted to attack civilians in northern Uganda, whom they perceived as their enemies, because they believed them to support the government, a government the LRA was at war with. But they also wanted to sustain the LRA including by abducting thousands of women and children. The charged crimes were all executed through the organized and hierarchical apparatus of power that was the LRA. Control Altar was a governing body and a type of LRA headquarters. It included posts like Army Commander, Deputy Army Commander, Chief of Staff. Those who operated LRA radio communications were also stationed there. There were 4 brigades: Sinia, Stokri, Gilva, and Trinkle, each led by a commander. The brigades were further divided into battalions, each equally led by a commander, and then further into companies known as KOIs. From September 2003 onwards, Mr. Kony created a division called JOGO. In the charged period, the LRA numbers fluctuated, but the system of abduction ensured that there were always sufficient numbers of fungible individuals to support a core fighting group of at least hundreds of fighters. And I refer you to the evidence provided by P455 at UGA OTP 0000-865, pages 7 to 10. Now let's look at the men within this hierarchy more specifically, those who commanded this hierarchy. Throughout the charged period, Kony remained the uncontested leader. Vincent O.T. was his deputy and vice chairman. He died November 2007. The command of the brigades changed over time by reason of promotion, demotion, opportunity, or death. Let us have a look at the individual brigade commanders now in turn. Until his death in late 2003, Charles Tibule was first in charge of Stokri Brigade and then became division commander. The prosecution alleges that Kony coordinated with Tibule on the abduction of the schoolgirls from Lwala Girls' School in June 2003. Buk Abudema was brigade commander of Gilva Brigade, then Sinia, then Stokri Brigade, then division commander. The prosecution alleges in particular his involvement in the attack on the Abok IDP camp. Dominique Ongwen, the convicted co-perpetrator, succeeded Abudema as brigade commander of Sinia Brigade. He was promoted by Mr. Kony on 4th March 2004, and I refer you to UGA OTP 0061 0002 at 0122. Ochan Bunya was brigade commander of Gilva. Charles Capera was in charge of Stokri Brigade, Sinia, and then Trinkle Brigade. The prosecution also alleges his involvement in the Lwala attack. Okoto Diambo was the commander of Trinkle Brigade, then Stokri Brigade, Gilva, and then he rose to Deputy Army Commander and Army Commander. Lakati was a Major General in Sinia Brigade. He then served as Deputy Chief of Staff and then Chief of Staff. And the prosecution alleges his involvement, for instance, in the attack on Pajula IDP camp. But he was also involved in weapons distribution for Mr. Kony. UGA OTP 00000865, pages 1 to 5. Jimmy Ochiti was a colonel and chief of personnel in Control Altar. Nyeko Yadin was a chief of staff and army commander until his death in 2004. And finally, Your Honors, Raska Lukuya is counted by the prosecution among the LRA's top commanders. He consistently held high-ranking positions as Deputy Army Commander and Army Commander within the LRA. For the duration of the period charged, it was at least this group of men who collaborated with Mr. Kony, acting under his command, to use the organized and hierarchical apparatus of power as a means to control those fighters who executed the charged crimes, subjugating LRA fighters to their will. For the evidence on each commander and his role, I refer you to footnotes 9 to 19 of our pre-confirmation brief, more specifically. Your Honors, up to 4 times daily, these commanders would connect with Mr. Kony via LRA radio and report to him. And we have collected these communications, and they are evidence in these proceedings. They also met Mr. Kony either in Uganda or the Sudan. Insider witnesses, whose statements are before you, explained that Mr. Kony issued orders through Vincent O.T., who would pass them down to the brigade commanders. They, in turn, would implement through their fighters assigned to the brigades. Their descriptions overlap consistently, each describing similar behaviors over the charged period. Their descriptions are corroborated by intercepted radio communications, as summarized in paragraph 12 to 13 of our brief. Now, Your Honors, Mr. Kony also exercised control over the charged crimes in counts 1 to 29 by virtue of his essential contributions. All his essential contributions are directly linked to the attacks on the IDP camps, the abduction and enslavement of people, and the use of children in hostilities. The evidence is clear on this link. Throughout the charged period, Mr. Kony regularly issued orders to LRA commanders to attack, kill, mistreat civilians. And these orders, they translated into actual attacks. By virtue of the grasp Mr. Kony and his commanders held on the LRA, these orders were implemented. Kony felt unsupported by civilians in northern Uganda. One such example demonstrating his internal thinking is an example from a logbook of the early charging period in October 2002, of which there are many in the collection. Kony calls Acholi stupid. He wishes all of them are killed. He mentions that the LRA will produce a new Acholi tribe, which will be much better than the present one. He orders the LRA to start waging havoc, and that only LRA remain in Acholi land. UGA OTP 0068 00002 at 0058. Witness P138 describes attacks on civilians in Iteso as a response to the establishment of local defense units and Kony's resentment against civilians who had moved to IDP camps. UGA OTP 0000607, page 22 and 25. I will now set out a few examples of such orders to kill civilians. the underlying evidence of these orders is summarized at paragraph 18 of our confirmation brief. The first examples are from early to late 2002. Among them is an order to start serious killing the people across northern Uganda. This conduct continues in 2003. For instance, Mr. Kony instructs OT to attack Gulu, Kitgum, Lira, and Pader. Still in 2003, Kony begins to target also the Lango and Iteso regions more specifically. He instructs schools and universities to be attacked and students killed. Commanders are to hit Lango areas mercilessly and then proceed to Teso. On account of such orders to Tabule and Oti, the Lwala Girls' School is attacked on 24th June 2003. You will hear more of this later on today. Pajule IDP camp is attacked on 10th October 2003. My colleague will address that later on today. The orders continue, and so do the LRA's attacks throughout 2003 and 2004. I wish to concentrate a moment on Mr. Kony's actions in relation to the Abia attack on 24th February 2004, which is emblematic of his criminal behavior. Prior to the attack, Mr. Kony reiterated his orders to attack and kill civilians. On 23rd January 2004, he is recorded to have said, and I quote from the logbook, "Let Odhiambo go and kill Langi tribes from the old to the kids." UGA OTP 0254 4143 at 4208 4209. Okot Odhiambo, Stockery Brigade Commander, then instructed his subordinates to proceed to Abia IDP camp and to kill everyone there, both soldiers and civilians, to burn the houses, including with people inside. And that is what they did. Kony was so pleased with Odhiambo that he ordered him to conduct an even larger attack. I refer you to several logbook entries. For example, UGA OTP 0061002 at 0047, or UGA OTP 02427309 at 7364, as well as the testimony and statements of several LRA insiders, which we have summarized at footnotes 252 to 254 of our brief. 3 weeks later, Your Honors, the LRA attack Barlonio IDP camp and kill over 300 people there. After this attack, Odhiambo reports back to Kony, like he's done previously, like he's used to doing, around 23rd February 2004. He says to Kony, "The deaths were overly many. No living thing could be seen there." UGA OTP 0132 0026 at 0040 0044. On 13th March 2004, Mr. Kony promotes Odhiambo from colonel to brigadier. The LRA attacks continue pursuant to Mr. Kony's orders and result in killing, pillaging, enslavement at the charged attacks of Odek, Pagak, Lukodi, and Abok. But Mr. Kony's essential contributions do not stop there. The evidence demonstrates that the LRA, under his authority and under his directions, abducted thousands of civilians. P71 explains that the order issued by Kony was to recruit civilians to join the army, and that this was a standing order. UGA OTP 0228-3708, pages 3730 to 3733. A demographic analysis of data of returnees resulted in a count of almost 11,000 abducted persons. On your screens, you find an excerpt of the results of the otherwise confidential report. The data is sourced from UGA OTP 00001133, page 3. Among the registered abductions, 22.6% were women and girls, and 77.4% were men and boys. This data supports the allegation on how one of the main aims of Kony was to abduct, to recruit fighters. Even more importantly, the data shows that 56.5% of the abductees were below 18 years old. This supports the assertion that Mr. Kony's aim was to sustain the LRA as a fighting force by creating an army of children. However, please note, Your Honors, that these figures are conservative. Only about 43% of all abducted children were actually registered. The actual numbers are most likely much higher. UGA OTP 00000942, page 3. And Mr. Kony also issued orders to abduct women. Insider witness P0233 testified that abductions of girls occurred habitually based on Mr. Kony's orders. UGA OTP 00000603, page 46. P205 testified that in 2002, prior to an operation, Kony issued an order to abduct beautiful girls, stating that, and I quote, "Whoever did not have a wife was going to get a wife." UGA OTP 00000657, pages 20 to 21. In this entry of 12th May 2003, Kony instructed his commanders that now they should seriously embark on abduction, that what he wants now is that many schoolgirls should be abducted and brought in the bush because they will help them as wives. For the record, UGA OTP 0068-0146 at 0161. Children, both girls and boys under the age of 18, were also systematically abducted. In a police report of intercepted radio communications from 6 May 2004, Mr. Kony ordered Vincent O.T. and Raska Lukuya to abduct many children to replace escapees and defectors. And Lukuya answered that he will. UGA OTP 0017-0187 at 0189. Insider witness P70 testified that the standing orders concerned children who could walk, who could help you carry luggage, who could be trained to be fighters, age 10 and above. UGA OTP 0000598, page 28. Insider witnesses describe how Mr. Kony devised and enforced the rules governing the mistreatment of abducted women and girls. For instance, young girls were first made babysitters called ting ting, and matured girls were forced to become wives. My colleague, Ms. Sanyo Ndegira, will today present the details on this and how this was implemented in practice. Kony also decided on the distribution of abducted women within the LRA. In a logbook entry of June 2003 from UGA OTP 0068 0146 at 0229, which appears on your screen, Mr. Kony gives precise instructions to an LRA fighter named Angola. Angola should give one lady to OT, keep one for himself, and then he instructs Angola to attack seriously in abducting more schoolgirls to replace their old women. P138, a former LRA member, and I quote from his transcript here now at UGA OTP 0000607, page 28 to 29. If you refuse to go to a particular husband, that means that you do not want to live. That means that you will be killed, and you will be killed immediately. So you make the decision. Do I want to live or do I want to die? And Your Honors, Mr. Kony led by example. The evidence shows that he made abducted children into his own escorts. I refer you to P23 at UGA OTP 01500063 at 0066 and 0070. Witnesses describe that he forced many women to become his wives. We have summarized this evidence at paragraph 56 of our brief, but you will hear more about the extent of this practice later on today. Mr. Kony and LRA commanders exercise control through a violent disciplinary system, implemented especially against low-ranking LRA members. Punishments for breaking LRA rules were immediate and brutal. They included beating, whipping, stabbing. And again, low-ranking LRA members were, in general, abducted children. The punishment for trying to escape was often death. P172 testified that Kony himself would tell them, "If you try to escape, I will kill you." The witness states that Kony would have his informants everywhere in the LRA, and that's why everyone was scared. UGA OTP 0000962, pages 12 to 13. The punishments extended to the abducted children. They were subjected to excruciating beatings, sometimes for little else than dropping food. Kony issued orders on military attacks and operations. For instance, he ordered the TESO campaigns and put OT in charge. UGA OTP 0208 0146 at 0152. According to insider witnesses, he made orders on where to move on the front line via the radio, and then details were left to OT to communicate. UGA OTP 0220 0068 at 0074. Kony was promoting and demoting commanders. I gave the example of Odhiambo today, but there are other examples throughout our evidence. Logbook entries across the charge period show how the LRA commanders reported their loot from operations, including weapons, to each other and to Mr. Kony via radio regularly, and that Mr. Kony then weighed in on the distributions. An example is UGA OTP 0232 0234 at 244. Your Honors, when looking holistically at the evidence, there can't be any doubt. Mr. Kony commanded the LRA. He and his co-perpetrators used the apparatus of power that was the LRA to control their fighters, subjugating them to their will, and he exercised control by virtue of his own essential contributions, not only to the common plan, its implementation, but to the crimes. Kony acted with intent and knowledge, which you can see from his own statements, some of which we have presented here today. But overall, his conduct is also of such a nature that it could only have been undertaken intentionally. And this concludes my presentation, first part of the prosecution's presentation on the merits. And I thank you very kindly for your attention, and we shall move into the break then now.
Thank you, Counsel. All right, so it is a minute or two before 1. We deem it to be 1 o'clock, and we shall be back at 2:30. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. It's okay, yes, all right. So 2:30, right, when we shall continue hearing the prosecution case on its merits. All right then.
All right, we will be.
Adults and children, men, women, boys, and girls. Moving on to ODEC, we have witness P325, and this is at UGA OTP 0264 at 0242 at paragraph 24. And this witness recalls finding the bodies of a grandmother and her grandson, and this child was still strapped to the back of his deceased grandmother. This witness also saw during the attack LRA fighters shooting at a heavily pregnant woman who was known to them as Asiro Monia, and she was fatally injured, Your Honors. Both mother and unborn baby died. For Pagak, the LRA forced the victims, many of the victims, out of the camp and took them to a nearby area where they were killed. Witness P12 at UGA OTP 0069 at 0002 at paragraphs 42 to 44 provides a complete narrative of how many of the victims of Pagak were killed, and witness 12 describes LRA fighters as holding torches at their feet and their heads as they were forced to lay face down on the ground. And these LRA fighters had wooden branches. I'll read it directly from her statement, Your Honors, starting at paragraph 43. And this witness states, several rebels started beating us, one after the other. They beat 9 people in the line to death. The 10th person was my husband. The person in line next to my husband was a lady, and then it was me. I lifted my head to see what was happening and saw that my husband was beaten to death. The rebels told me, "What are you looking at? If you continue looking, we'll shoot you." Your Honors, several residents, including this witness, was left severely injured, while many others died as a result of the severe beating that the LRA rebels delivered that night. For Lukodi, children were not spared during the attack, as witness P187 at UGA OTP 000-0636 at page 21 testified in the Ongwen trial that he saw LRA fighters putting children in bags and beating them to death and throwing some of these children who were placed in the bags away into the bush. He also saw the LRA fighters throw 2 babies around 2 months to 3 months old, and this witness knows them by the name Kana and Lamunu, and they were thrown into the fire. For Abuk, the prosecution highlights the experience of one survivor, and this is witness 293 at UGA OTP 000-00619 at page 40. And this witness testified in the Ongwen trial, and he states that after the attack, he went and he discovered his father, and his father had been beaten so severely that his brain spilled from his skull. Your Honors, as the witnesses, the witnesses' account demonstrate, the LRA fighters killed many civilians, and they killed them indiscriminately: men, women, girls, boys, and babies. Your Honors, I'll now turn to highlight the evidence in relation to those who survived. And the prosecution's case is that at least 194 civilians the LRA attempted to kill them. However, they survived due to independent circumstances. And again, the pattern of violence was similar. They were shot at, they were beaten, they were stabbed, and they were locked into buildings, and these buildings were set on fire. And for Abia, the prosecution is highlighting the case of a female child. She was around 10 years old at the time, and her hospital records note a penetrating injury to the abdomen through the chest, including injury to her kidney and liver. From the attack on Barlonio IDP camp, a female, 48 years old, and the hospital record notes a shrapnel hit to the lumbar region, which is to the survivor's lower back, and a gunshot wound to the right thigh and a cut to the left breast. For the attack on Odek IDP camp, a female sustained a gunshot injury to the back of her neck. From the attack on Pagak IDP camp, on your screen, Your Honors, is perhaps a photograph of one of the youngest survivors, and this is taken at UGA OTP 0023-0410. And this was an 8.5-month-old baby. And during the attack, the LRA rebels beat this baby to a state of unconsciousness using a stick. And this baby had to undergo a skull X-ray and was so severely injured that the hospital record notes that the baby could not breastfeed due to their injuries. For the attack on Lwala, again, we have a 7-year-old child, and the LRA fighters beat the 7-year-old to a state of unconsciousness, and she sustained a lifelong injury to her eye. And then we have a buck where, for witness 279, she recounts the LRA fighters beating and strangling her to a state of unconsciousness. And when she recovered consciousness, she noticed that she was bleeding from the mouth and the nose. Your Honors, these representative cases are taken from Annexes E3-2I to E8-2I, which were filed with the prosecution's pre-confirmation brief. The prosecution will now go to those who were abducted and enslaved. And earlier, my colleague Leonie von Braun addressed the chamber on Mr. Kony's standing orders to abduct and integrate people into the LRA, especially women and children. And in the aftermath of the attacks in Pajule, Abia, Odek, Pagak, Lukodi, and Abok, the LRA abducted and enslaved hundreds of civilians as part of the plan to sustain the LRA. Some were released, some were killed, others managed to escape early on, but many were integrated into the LRA as part of Mr. Kony's aim to create a new tribe. For clarity, Your Honors, those who were detained for less than a week are counted for count 10, and those who were enslaved for longer periods of time are counted under count 15, and my colleagues will later today and tomorrow address the chamber on those charges. Your Honors, the survivors share a similar narrative. They recall that some were tied up and forced out of the attacked IDP camps while being guarded by the LRA fighters. Others recall that the LRA fighters beat them as they struggled to carry the luggage, and luggage, Your Honors, stands for the items that they looted from the camps, such as food. Some abductees watched as their relatives were killed, and some abductees were severely beaten or shot, suffering severe injuries. For instance, Odek survivor, witness P218, at UGA OTP 0238 at 0720 at paragraph 33, states that many men, women, and children were abducted from the camp during the attack, and to his knowledge, most of the women were returned to the camp by the LRA. However, they kept many of the children in the bush with them. Pagak survivor, witness P13 at UGA OTP 0069 at 0176 at paragraphs 38 to 40, describes her brief time in captivity as being forced to carry looted items on her head and being subjected to severe beatings, and this witness lost sight in her eye. Your Honors, the evidence of the LRA's widespread and systematic brutal violence was not only limited to camp residents, it was also directed at the property of the camp residents, and this was across the 7 IDP camps where the LRA fighters looted household goods, livestock, food, and they forced the camp residents to carry these items out of the camp. Your Honors, for the Pajule attack, there is witness P67 at UGA OTP 0000611 at page 36. And this witness states that one of the primary roles of some of the LRA fighters as they attacked in groups was to go into the camps and to take away the items that they looted during the attack. Your Honors, even the reports of the LRA commanders who led the attack also establishes the prosecution's evidence concerning the aim of the LRA as it relates to looting and destruction. For example, Otti, when he reported the attack to Mr. Kony on the Pagak IDP camp, and this, Your Honors, is found at UPDF logbook UGA OTP 0255 at 0228 at page 00249, detailed that he had burned 500 huts. For Lukodi, Dominic Ongwen also made similar reports to Mr. Kony. Your Honors, earlier today, Deputy Prosecutor Niang had shown a Barlonio video, and from that video, one could see signs of destroyed buildings. On your screens, Your Honors, are photographs of the aftermath of the attack on the camps of Abia, Barlonio, Pagak, and Lukodi. As shown here, Your Honors, the structures appear to have been destroyed by fire. Your Honors, turning to the issue of persecution, the prosecution has throughout today highlighted the persecutory behavior of the LRA under the orders of Mr. Kony, and the acts and experiences of the survivors, which I have highlighted today, demonstrates this persecutory intent. Your Honors, the prosecution could only provide a snapshot of the extensive body of evidence coming from its over 180 witnesses. The prosecution submits that there are substantial grounds to believe that Mr. Kony is criminally responsible for the attacks detailed at counts 1 through to 13. Your Honors, I thank the court for its time and attention, and I'll now turn over to my colleague Sanyu Ndegiri, who will address the chamber on the systemic crimes, and Ms. Ndegiri is a national of Uganda. I thank you.
May it please the court, my name is Sanyu Ndegiri, and as my colleague just mentioned, I will be addressing the systemic crimes committed by Joseph Kony and his co-perpetrators against girls and women. And just to inform the chamber, my presentation, my submissions will be about 40 minutes long, or a bit longer, so I request the indulgence of the chamber if we could conclude a little after 4 p.m., if it's all right.
We'll see how it goes. Go on. Begin.
Thank you. Your Honors, from at least 1st July 2002 to 31st December 2005, at least thousands of girls and women were abducted by the LRA from villages, schools, IDP camps, and locations across northern Uganda, pursuant to Joseph Kony's standing orders. They were forcibly integrated into the LRA. The girls became ting ting, a term that the LRA used for young girls who performed domestic chores and looked after the LRA commanders' children. The women became the forced wives of these commanders and were forced to have sexual intercourse with the commanders, bear their children, and perform domestic duties. To support the figure of at least thousands of women and girls as charged in the document containing the charges, we rely on the demographic analysis of returnees that my colleague Ms. von Braun referred to earlier this morning. The prosecution submits that there are substantial grounds to believe that Mr. Kony is criminally responsible as an indirect co-perpetrator for the crimes charged in counts 15 to 22, 24, and 27 to 29 of the document containing the charges, with respect to women and girls that were forcibly integrated into the LRA from at least 1st July 2002 until 31st December 2005 in northern Uganda. Mr. Kony is charged with the following crimes listed in these counts: enslavement, the inhumane act of forced marriage, rape, torture, other inhumane acts of severe abuse and mistreatment, cruel treatment, gender persecution, as well as sexual slavery and forced pregnancy. Mr. Kony is also criminally responsible as an indirect co-perpetrator for the crimes charged in counts 1, 6 to 11, and 14 with respect to the LRA's attack on Lwala Girls' School on or about 24th June 2003 that resulted in pillaging, as well as enslavement, torture, other inhumane acts of severe abuse and mistreatment, cruel treatment, and persecution of at least 70 schoolgirls. I will first address the first two counts of the crime of enslavement with which Mr. Kony is charged. To avoid double counting of the victims, the prosecution distinguishes between the crime of enslavement in counts 10 and 15 as follows. Count 10 relates to abducted civilians who were released, who escaped or were killed by the LRA in the immediate aftermath of the attacks. These include at least 12 schoolgirls abducted by the LRA from Lwala Girls' School and who managed to escape shortly after their abduction or were released in the days after the attack on the school. Count 15 relates to women and girls that were abducted and forcibly integrated into the LRA for protracted periods of time as ting-ting and forced wives. They include at least thousands of women and girls abducted from across northern Uganda during the charged period, including the schoolgirls from Lwala Girls' School who were not released or who were unable to escape. The evidence shows, with regard to the crimes of enslavement, forced marriage, and sexual slavery, that the abducted girls and women who were not released or were unable to escape were subsequently distributed without their consent to LRA commanders and fighters as forced wives and ting-ting to engage in acts of a sexual nature, including sexual intercourse, and to perform domestic duties. Witness P214, who was herself abducted at the age of 17, states, and I quote, Kony decided to distribute us girls to different commanders as wives. Kony was seated under a tree and called us. He looked at us and told his security guards to pick 4 girls for him to stay in his home. Kony then told the top commanders to also pick girls. The commanders pointed at the girls they wanted, and then their security guards would take the selected girls to their homes. After that, Kony allocated the rest of the girls to lower-ranking commanders. Each commander received 1 girl. The girls did not have a choice but to go with the commanders. We were told on where to go, and if one resisted, she was beaten. I saw that some of the girls resisted, and they started crying when they were forcefully taken away. End quote. I refer your honors to UGA OTP 02340026 at page 0034. The evidence shows that the practice of abducting women and girls was rampant across the LRA during the charged period. An example of this practice was the LRA's abduction of about 70 schoolgirls from the Lwala Girls' School on or about 24th June 2003, which I now turn to. The 2025 dynamic Google Earth map, which appears on your screens, depicts where Lwala Girls' School is in Uganda. The map and its annotations are premised on the public Annex D of the prosecution's pre-confirmation brief and paragraph 154 of the pre-confirmation brief, which also cites the underlying evidence of the route that the abducted schoolgirls were forced to take and their subsequent distribution within the LRA. Lwala Girls' School is situated in the Lwala village of Kaberamaido district in Teso in northeastern Uganda. And in June 2003, about 230 girls were resident at this boarding school. By 2003, the LRA were conducting operations in the Teso region in compliance with Mr. Kony's standing orders to abduct women and girls and his persecutory campaign for the LRA to target schoolgirls collectively on the basis of their age and gender. By 23rd June 2003, Stokri Brigade's Mendu Battalion Commander, Charles Kapere, and Wake Up Battalion Commander, Okelo Lagulu, were together in the Amuria area, which is about 50 kilometers east of Lwala Girls' School. And I refer your honors to logbook UGA OTP 00680146, page 0270 and 0272. Lagulu and Kapere complied with the instructions that their commander, Charles Tabule, had given them, which was to abduct, to identify schools in order to attack and abduct schoolgirls. Lagulu and Kapere selected 30 fighters from their battalions to attack Lwala Girls' School, and Opio Achea, who was Lagulu's second in command, led the attack on the school in the early hours of 24th June 2003. Witnesses P68, P2, and P15 recall that the fighters that attacked the school were armed with machetes, knives, AK-47s, rocket-propelled grenades, and PK machine guns, and that the LRA fighters also included children under the age of 15. The features that we will be identifying on this 2025 Google Earth image of Lwala Girls' School is also used as a visual aid and premised on a sketch which is at UGA OTP 01390077 and was drawn by witness P75. This image depicts what the school premises looked like in 2003. The direction north is to your left on the image. You can also see the main gate, the classrooms, the dormitories, and the staff quarters. A week prior to the attack, the school teachers and students at Lwala Girls' School heard from civilians in the area that the LRA were in Amuria and Katakwi and that they were coming to abduct the students. This is from statements UGA OTP 0043, 0131, page 0134, and statement UGA OTP 0139, 0047 at paragraph 57. Upon learning of this impending attack, some students were lucky enough to be taken home by their parents before the LRA fighters got to the school. Other students managed to run away when the fighters attacked the school in the early hours of 24th June 2003. However, witnesses P2, P1079, P1084, P15, P21, P129, P79, and P4 were not so fortunate. They were amongst the 70 schoolgirls ranging between the ages of 13 to 19 that were abducted by the LRA fighters. At about 2:30 a.m. on 24th June 2003, P68 was patrolling the school grounds when he suddenly heard screams from the dormitories. As he approached the generator room, which was across the dormitories on the campus, P68 saw through the pouring rain LRA fighters carrying flashing torchlights while moving in and out of the dormitories. He recalls that the fighters were wearing military uniforms and carrying guns. This is at UGA OTP 0139 0007, paragraphs 48 and 54. P2 was asleep in Saskia dormitory when she was suddenly woken up by a short LRA fighter who she estimates was about 13 years old and carried a rocket-propelled grenade. With him were 4 other LRA fighters who were boys, and they carried ammunition magazines on their waists, as well as knives, guns, and machetes in their hands. This is at UGA OTP 0070 0002 at page 5. P15 was a 13-year-old student and attempted to run away when the LRA fighters came into her dormitory room. An LRA fighter caught her and brought her back to the group of the abducted girls assembled outside in the rain by the LRA fighters. Statement UGA OTP 0043 0131, pages 0133 and 0135. Some of the schoolgirls, like P4, P21, P79, were barefoot, and others like P2, P15, P1079, and P1084 were still in their nightclothes and school uniforms. The LRA fighters then bound the schoolgirls together with rope or bed sheets from their dormitories, which they secured around the girls' waists. They then beat and forced the girls to carry looted food, medicine, clothes, and mattresses while marching them out of the school gate. The first pit stop that the fighters made was Otoboy. It was here that the LRA fighters broke into shops at Otoboy's trading center and looted food and other items like cooking oil and soap, which they then forced the enslaved schoolgirls to carry. A number of the schoolgirls managed to escape, while the LRA fighters were pillaging Otoboy's trading center. But P4 and P15 were not successful. LRA fighters beat them severely with sticks and machetes, and then beat the rest of the enslaved girls across their backs and their buttocks. P4 saw one girl beaten so badly that she was bleeding, and P21 was beaten with a wire lock. Statement UGA OTP 0139 0097, page 0102, and statement UGA D26 0025 0097 at page 0100. P41 recounts that when the enslaved girls arrived at Charles Kapere's location, Kapere warned them not to try and escape because they were going to be taken to someone of a higher rank. Kapere then released about 12 of the schoolgirls who could not walk well and those who were considered too old. This is at UGA OTP 0221 0077 at page 89. On 25th June 2003, Charles Kapere relayed the success of the attack on the girls' school to his commander, Charles Tabule, over the radio. He confirmed having attacked Otoboy Mission in Kaveramaido district and that 56 girls were abducted from a secondary school there, but that most of them were ugly. Logbook UGA OTP 0068 0146 at page 0277. Charles Tabule instructed Kapere not to release the girls until his arrival and said that even if the girls are ugly, the LRA will not mind so long as they are fit to be trained as soldiers. Logbook UGA OTP 0241 2490, page 2680, and logbook UGA OTP 0242 6018 at page 6047. By 26 June 2003, the remaining enslaved schoolgirls from Lwala Girls' School had arrived in Orungo. The girls were then split between Lagulu and Kapere and taken to Charles Tabule's brigade in Orungo, where all 4 Stokri battalions were gathered. Witnesses P1079 and P21 recall that to get to Tabule's location, the girls had to cross swamps filled with water that was chest high, and that all the while the girls were still tied together at the waist. The LRA radio communication at 1100 hours on the 27th of June 2003 confirms that Tabule was now with Lagulu. witnesses P41, P0136, and P10, confirm that the schoolgirls remained with Tabule for about 2 nights and then were split into smaller groups within his brigade of about 5 girls each. These smaller groups were then distributed to LRA commanders Tabule, Kapere, Okuti, and Labongo. On 28th June 2003, Oti reported over the radio that he was in Obalanga. On or about 30th June 2003, the remaining girls were taken by Kapere and Tabule to Vincent Oti in Olyelo, Widiel, in Padere district. And on 1st July 2003, they were then taken onwards to Lokole and Kalongo. On 5th July 2003, Kony, over the radio, asked Tabule whether the abducted girls from Teso and Lango are beautiful, to which Tabule responded, "Some are ugly, and only 4 are beautiful." Tabule further inquired whether Kony wanted any of them for a wife. I refer your honors to logbook UGA OTP 0060-0149 at pages 0175 to 0176. The following day, which was 6th July 2003, Kony instructed for the recruits from Teso to be kept well. This is in logbook UGA OTP 0068-0146 at page 0298. 4 enslaved girls were ultimately taken to Tim Palukok on 7th July 2003 by Vincent Oti, Tabule, and Kapere to meet Mr. Kony in person. Tim Palukok was a hideout where Kony stayed when he was in Uganda, and it was located in Kitgum district, Orom sub-county, close to the borders of Kidepo Game Reserve and the border of South Sudan. And Tim Palukok, for your honors, is a distance of about 200 kilometers from Lwala Girls' School, where these girls had been taken from. Kony selected 2 of the girls, including victim 2, whose victimization we refer to at paragraphs 167 to 169 of the pre-confirmation brief. And these girls were to stay in his household permanently as his wives. And then Vincent Oti kept some of the enslaved girls for himself. The LRA radio communication of 22nd July 2003, which is recorded in logbook UGA OTP 0068-0146 at page 0324, reveals that Tabule was ordered by Kony to distribute the rest of the enslaved Lwala schoolgirls, who were about 23 in number by this time, to LRA commanders Ochan Bunia, Okoto Diambo, and Book Abudema. The memorial plaque that you now see on your screens, Your Honors, was installed and officially unveiled on the Lwala Girls' School grounds by Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni in 2015 in honor of the 70 schoolgirls who were abducted by the LRA on or about 24th June 2003. And this is UGA OTP 00000017. I will now focus on the evidence regarding the systemic crimes against abducted women and girls integrated into the LRA, which we have charged at counts 15 to 22, 24, and 27 to 29. The prosecution alleges that at least thousands of women and girls were targeted as part of the LRA's persecutory campaign for abduction and integration into the LRA on the premise of their gender. The abducted women and girls were treated by the LRA like chattels or spoils of war to be awarded to commanders as their wives and ting-ting. The prosecution provides in Annex E10 to the pre-confirmation brief a list of 204 individually identifiable women and girls who were abducted and forcefully integrated into the LRA as forced wives and ting-ting during the charged period. These women and girls were abducted by the LRA from the following locations: Omoro on 18th June 2003, Ogalai in Katakwi district in June 2003, from Lwala Girls School on or about 24th June 2003, from Pajule IDP camp on or about 10th October 2003, and from Omia Pachwa around December 2004. Of these 204 women and girls, 117 were forced wives during their captivity by the LRA and were subjected to the crimes of enslavement, the inhumane act of forced marriage, rape, torture, other inhumane acts of severe abuse and mistreatment, cruel treatment, gender persecution, as well as sexual slavery and forced pregnancy. Kony devised the rule that the girls who had begun menstruating were considered mature enough to become wives. Witness P142 estimated that there were more than 100 wives in senior brigade alone from the year 2003 to 2004. In the Dominic Ongwen trial, witness P70 testified that most of the LRA commanders in the bush had wives, and that some fighters had 10 wives, some had 20 wives, and that Kony himself had approximately 90 wives. This is transcript UGA OTP 00000599 at page 39. On your screen, Your Honors, is photographic evidence of Mr. Kony's rule and the LRA practice regarding forced marriage. These photographs, which were provided by witness P70, depict various commanders with their wives and children while in the bush. We have blurred their faces, the faces of the women and children, for their privacy. The enlarged photo that you now see depicts LRA Commander Raska Lukuya with his then women who were wives and children. One witness lists over a dozen of Kony's wives by name. This is in statement UGA OTP 00001146 at page 13. Witnesses P23, P48, P99, P0226, and P15 also corroborate the large number of wives that Mr. Kony had. Mr. Kony would select his wives from the young girls and women brought to him by the brigade commanders, as was the case with victim 1 and victim 2. Forced wives had to maintain an exclusive sexual relationship with the LRA commander to whom they were distributed, which meant that they were forced to have sexual intercourse with him on demand. They also had to bear children, perform domestic chores, carry out labor, and do what their husband instructed them to. According to witness P351, girls used to do a lot of work, including carrying food and cooking, and in case of an attack, carry everything. This is statement UGA OTP 0263 0002 at page 13. As a result of the forced sexual intercourse that the abducted women and girls endured within the coercive environment of the LRA, at least hundreds of women and girls became pregnant, having no choice as to whether, when, or with whom to have a child. The expectation of women to produce children was central to Kony's motive, which was to create a new Acholi tribe. And this was implemented through the abduction, enslavement, and forced marriage of women. Further evidence of this comes from the victims themselves. P227 stated that her forced husband, Dominic Ongwen, told her that she must have a child. She also heard from other forced wives that Kony said each woman must have 15 children. Statement UGA OTP 0235 0125 at page 0138. P23 states, and I quote, "Girls and women were abducted for two main reasons. First, because they helped to cook. Second, because they produced children. Mature girls were given to the commanders as their wives. Girls were considered mature once they had their first menstrual period. This was a rule made by Kony. Before that, they were not allowed to be touched. This was another rule by Kony." End quote.
Counsel, if I may interrupt you, you'd asked for a few minutes. May I inquire what exactly is your request? We are minded to grant up to 15 minutes today, but we will not be able to grant more. Is it possible for you then to wrap up
Yes.
in the 15-minute period?
Yes, I will be
Very
able
well
to.
then. You may continue.
And just for the record, Your Honors, the quote that I read out was statement UGA OTP 0150 0063 at page 0071. Pregnant women and girls were not free to leave the LRA. The LRA subjected them to the same coercive and violent environment, including forced exclusive sexual relationships and sexual abuse. The LRA unlawfully confined these women and girls during their pregnancies with the intent to carry out grave violations of international law, including continued enslavement, rape, torture, and the inhumane act of forced marriage. This included at least one of the victims' children fathered by Kony, who was born in Uganda during the charged period, while other children of Kony were conceived and born outside of the charged period and outside of Uganda. These witnesses confirmed the existence of a pattern of forced pregnancy with which Mr. Kony is charged. The LRA specifically targeted young girls who they referred to as Ting Ting for abduction and enslavement. Because of their young age, the LRA considered them less likely to have sexually transmitted diseases. These Ting Ting included at least 11 prosecution witnesses, although the evidence suggests that the number of girls subjected to this state assault role was much higher. And we refer you to report UGA OTP 00001133 at pages 3 to 4. Annex E10 of the pre-confirmation brief indicates that from the 204 individually identifiable women and girls, about 48 of the girls were Ting Ting in the LRA during the charged period. One witness recalls that there were 10 Ting Ting in Vincent Ortiz's household in 2003. Statement UGA OTP 0043 01 P131 at page 0141. P140, a former Ting of an LRA commander, was tasked with carrying goods, collecting water, cooking, and taking care of children and babies. P467, a former child soldier, stated that the girls' role was to cook and carry luggage, and that when they were old enough, they would become wives. Statement UGA OTP 00000510 at page 16. The young age of these girls did not guarantee protection from sexual violence, however. P264 recalls that the LRA commanders had sex with their Ting who were too young to be married. Statement UGA OTP 0256 0139 at page 0163. I now turn to the evidence of the torture or cruel treatment, other inhumane acts of severe abuse and mistreatment that the girls and women in the LRA were subjected to during the charged period. Abducted women and girls were subjected to a coercive and violent environment, including various forms of physical and psychological violence, often for a protracted period of time. Many were severely beaten and threatened with violence for resisting sexual intercourse, other sexual violence, or for merely breaking LRA rules. In the words of witness P236, if there is anything wrong, you are beaten. If you do anything wrong, you are beaten. Statement UGA OTP 00000784 at page 13. In some cases, women and girls were beaten or killed for attempting to escape. For instance, P227 saw a girl beaten so badly that she could not eat. P374 describes how 2 girls were killed by LRA fighters. This is statement UGA 0263 0023 at page 0041. The LRA radio communication of 18th December 2002 reveals that Kony ordered the beating of a woman with 50 strokes for refusing to hand over a young child as a babysitter or Ting. This is logbook UGA OTP 00650002 at page 0115. Some abducted women and girls were also forced to beat or participate in the killing of other abductees who tried to escape. P0139 was made to beat a female abductee with a stick, a big stick, until she was about to die. P15 recalls how 2 boys that attempted to escape were beaten until they were nearly dead, and that afterwards the 2 boys were stabbed to death by LRA fighters. In one instance, an abducted girl was made to carry the severed head of an abductee who had been killed for trying to escape. This is statement UGA OTP 00000622, pages 25 to 26. Witness P1079 recalls the punishment that one abducted girl received for attempting to escape. The girl was forced to remove her blouse, and with a burning hot machete, the sign of the cross was carved into her bare back. The girl was then forced to carry a bag on her back. Statement UGA OTP 00001403 at paragraph 83. Abducted women and girls suffered severe physical and mental pain and suffering, as a result of the systematic physical and psychological abuse in the coercive environment and poor living conditions they endured. This included constant hunger and dehydration, injuries sustained during sexual intercourse or while performing domestic chores, poor hygiene, intake of substances triggering menstruation, pregnancy, childbirth, and postnatal complications, all in an environment in which they were deprived access to medical care. One witness describes that neither she nor the babies she bore had access to medical care in the time relevant to the charges. Shortly after giving birth, the witness had to cut her baby's umbilical cord herself using grass in the bush, and then sealed the umbilical cord with a thread from the wrapper she was wearing. Statement UGA OTP 00001146 at pages 20 to 21. Witness P1079 states that pregnant women within the LRA who went into labor had to give birth to their babies while on the move in the bush. P1079 once saw the wife of an LRA commander give birth to a baby as she walked together with the group through the bush. Statement UGA OTP 00001403 at paragraph 76. This continued deprivation of liberty, sexual and reproductive autonomy, and the subjugation to forced marriage and sexual intercourse against their will caused great. Heard today, Your Honors, is a snapshot of the totality of evidence regarding from Lwala Girls' School, as well as many other women and girls abducted from across northern Uganda and that were forcibly integrated into the LRA. We submit that the charges against him should be confirmed in relation to counts 1, 6 to 11, and 14 regarding the attack on Lwala Girls' School, and counts 15 to 22, 24, and counts 27 to 29 with respect to the women and girls that were forcibly integrated into the LRA. From at least 1st July 2002 until 31st December, address the crimes that were committed against children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counsel. All right, this would be then the end of our day. We will continue tomorrow. I'm reminding you at 9:30. All right.
All right, we will away.
A good day to all.